This is a story of the most famous child still missing in America. It is a tragic tale of a 6-year-old who was last seen right here on his way to school. The first grader needed to walk just 2 blocks to get to his bus stop, but somehow he disappeared completely before reaching it. His story captured the attention of an entire city and then an entire nation as police and his parents worked tirelessly to find him and to find solutions for missing children everywhere. Perverted and painful, complicated and confusing, this is the story of the search for Etan Patz. The Patzes lived here, 113 Prince Street, and on May 25th, 1979, Etan's mother walked him 3 flights down to this door. And instead of walking him to the bus stop, she kissed him goodbye right here. It was the first day that he'd ever walked all the way to the bus by himself, though he'd wanted to go alone for a while and was really excited about it. Etan was an independent child. That day, he had woken before his parents and dressed himself in blue pants, a blue corduroy jacket, and his black pilot's cap, with future flight captain written across the top. He'd made his own toast and poured his own chocolate milk for breakfast. Etan was so excited to brave these streets all on his own. His mother, Julie, watched him walk confidently until he neared the end of the first block here, when she turned and ran back upstairs to care for other children. Soho mailman Dorsey Whitaker saw Etan here too, but the mail carrier was headed the other direction and didn't see if he successfully crossed the street. The little boy, carrying his elephant book bag and a $1 bill, a gift for soda, simply vanished somehow on these busy streets and was never seen again. But for 8 hours, the Patz family went about their lives business as normal. Etan's older sister, Shira, went to school. His father went to work, and his mother cared for his little brother, Ari, and ran her daycare business out of their apartment. Nothing seemed amiss at first. When Etan wasn't home by 3:30 that afternoon, Julie phoned her friend, another mother who would normally meet Etan at the bus and walk him home, a woman named Karen. But she told Julie that Etan hadn't gotten off the bus. Karen had picked up her own children at the intersection of West Broadway and Prince Street here, but Etan hadn't been there. And when she asked her children, they told her that Etan hadn't been in school. Terrified, Julie called the police. At first, when law enforcement arrived, they were optimistic. Most missing children are located and returned to their families promptly. But as the minutes and hours ticked by, everyone grew more concerned. Etan's father, Stan, a professional photographer, gathered pictures that he had taken of his son and shared them with authorities. An estimated 100 officers went door to door that evening, entering buildings, going up and down fire escapes and stairwells throughout Soho. The next day, they brought in bloodhounds, but found nothing. The Patzes asked the media for help, and overnight, Etan's image was plastered across front pages and televisions all over the city. Before long, it was projected on screens in Times Square. As hours turned to days, Etan's plight became well known throughout New York. His bright eyes and sweet smile peered out from every street corner, and his story was a relatable reminder of childhood. Etan represented innocence everywhere, an innocence that was lost. A group of New Yorkers organized the Etan Patz Action Committee. They printed hundreds of thousands of missing posters, which, thanks to a local travel agency, were distributed in more than 60 countries. But primarily, the police focus remained local. They brought in helicopters and searched the rivers. Many hundreds of officers worked diligently day and night. But after 12 agonizing days, the door-to-door search was called off. Investigators tried other tactics. People that had walked down Prince Street that morning were hypnotized. 5 months into the investigation, a sketch of a suspicious man who may have been seen talking to Etan was drawn and distributed. Hundreds of leads were followed, but nothing panned out. Stan and Julie Patz grieved for their son and grieved for the loss of normalcy in their lives. The unknowing is the worst part, Stan tells media at a press conference for the first anniversary of Etan's disappearance, saying, quote, "It's not the same as death. You can confront death. This is worse." Thrust into the public eye, the Patzes began to use their platform to ask for reform. They requested that schools notify parents when children were absent. Stan tells reporters that he has learned that the FBI keeps better records of stolen license plates than they do of missing children. But the Patzes worked to change that. Etan becomes literally the poster child for missing child awareness. And in 1983, President Ronald Reagan designated May 25th, the anniversary of Etan's disappearance, as National Missing Children's Day in the United States. With a national spotlight on Etan Patz, law enforcement continued to actively pursue his case. In 1988, they procured what some considered a confession from a man that had been on their suspect list for several years, Jose Ramos. Ramos had dated a woman who had been hired to walk Etan home from school during a bus strike. A convicted child molester, Ramos said that on the day of Etan's disappearance, that he had found a young boy in Washington Square Park and brought him back to his apartment. He said that when the boy protested, he had let him go. Ramos was quoted as saying that he was 90% sure that it was the child that he had seen on TV. However, Ramos would not use Etan's name, and police could not find any evidence to corroborate his claims. With no physical evidence that their paths had ever crossed, and no witnesses either, police were unable to charge him with any crimes related to Etan's disappearance. Years passed. Unable to pursue a criminal case against their prime suspect, the frustrated parents decided to do something difficult. In the name of answers and justice, Etan was declared legally dead in 2001, so that Stan and Julie could pursue a civil case against Ramos. The Patzes won, and for a while, the matter seemed settled. But then, to everyone's surprise, nearly 10 years later, in 2012, authorities dug up the basement of this building, 127 Prince Street. It's just down the block from Etan's home. It was the workshop that belonged to the handyman who had given Etan that $1 bill for soda that he carried with him that day. Othniel Miller had apparently poured a concrete floor in the days after Etan had gone missing. Could this have had something to do with Etan's disappearance? After 4 days, authorities announced that nothing conclusive had been found. But it had not been for nothing. Publicity from the search brought in another new lead, one that would finally provide answers to questions that had been haunting the community for over 30 years. On May 24th of 2012, police announced that they had a written confession from a man who had implicated himself in Etan's disappearance. The man's name was Pedro Hernandez. In 1979, Hernandez had been an 18-year-old high school dropout. To make some money, he had taken a job at a convenience store in this building as a stock boy. This is, again, the intersection of West Broadway and Prince Street, Etan's bus stop. After more than 30 years of investigation, it was a tip from a concerned family member that had alerted authorities to Pedro Hernandez. Over the decades, Hernandez had told multiple people that he'd, quote, done something bad to a child in New York. When his brother-in-law, Jose Lopez, saw the coverage of the excavation on Prince Street, he knew that it was time to talk to law enforcement. They picked up Hernandez from his home in New Jersey and took him to the local FBI field office, where after 7 hours of interrogation, he confessed. He told authorities that he had seen a little boy waiting on the street and had lured him down to the convenience store basement with the promise of a soda. There, he grabbed the young boy by the neck and choked him. Next, he placed the child's body in a bag, that bag in a box, and carried that box on his shoulders down the sidewalk. During a walk of these streets with investigators, Hernandez indicated that he placed that box near the trash at 113 Thompson Street, here. He even recalled how the building exterior had changed since 1979 and a door added. Convinced that they now had their man, the case was presented to a grand jury, and Hernandez was charged with second-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. But even with a confession, the case wasn't as open and shut as one might think. Investigators believed that the box containing Etan's remains was taken to a landfill and lost in the mountains of trash. With no body, no physical evidence, and no corroborating witnesses from that fateful day, prosecutors had only Hernandez's own words to use against him. One written and one recorded confession. And Hernandez had recounted his confessions. His defense lawyers called them fabrications made under pressure from police. Hernandez pled not guilty, and the case went to trial. It lasted 3 months. The prosecution brought in witnesses from Hernandez's church, St. Anthony of Padua. They testified that once, during a prayer retreat in the 80s, Hernandez had told them that he had hurt a boy in New York City. His ex-wife, Daisy Rivera, also took the witness stand. She testified that he told her that he had done something terrible, strangled someone, and thrown the body in a dumpster. Ms. Rivera also told the courtroom that she had once found a picture of Etan in Hernandez's belongings. The defense attempted to discredit Hernandez's confessions and presented evidence of his mental health issues. He had been diagnosed with schizotypal personality disorder, which can include hallucinations and make it difficult for him to distinguish between reality and fiction. Becky Hernandez, the defendant's daughter, testified that she had heard him talk to himself and make claims about seeing demons and an angelic woman who dressed in white. Additionally, Pedro Hernandez had an IQ of about 70, quote, at the border of intellectual disability. Jurors spent 18 days deliberating, but could not come to an agreement on Hernandez's guilt. And eventually, the judge declared a mistrial. The jury was deadlocked, 11-1 for conviction. The one holdout, Adam Serwa, came forward speaking to the media about the difficulties jurors had faced in the case, saying, quote, "A big bone of contention was the mental health issue. We debated that for days." And the other issue that was very sticky at first was the confession. Everyone felt very upset about not being able to see the entire interview. End quote. Only the last hour of the 7-hour interrogation had been recorded, making many wonder what exactly had transpired in those first 6 hours. The Patzes were disappointed. They had the civil judgment against Jose Ramos dismissed and wanted Hernandez retried. And he was. A second trial began a year and a half later. And after 9 days of deliberations, that jury came to a verdict. Guilty. On April 18th, 2017, Pedro Hernandez was sentenced to life in prison. He and his lawyer appealed the conviction, but it was unanimously affirmed by the appellate court in early 2020. There seems to be quite the mix of opinions on Hernandez in the true crime community. While he has most certainly been found guilty in the eyes of the law, plenty of people still feel that Jose Ramos was actually Etan's killer. Hernandez had no criminal history and no clear motive. whereas Ramos is a convicted criminal with a preference for boys Etan's age. Today, both men are in prison, and Etan Patz is still missing. Forever 6 years old. Forever America's missing child. Forever gone.